Many of our speakers need no introduction, and as the chief executive since July, Mr. Leung has been in the news almost constantly, so there's very little I can tell you about him that you don't already know. I did recently discover, though, that he was actually a member of the Foreign Correspondents Club in the 1980s. I don't know whether any of you here knew him then. That was a time when his political career was taking off with his service on the Basic Law Consultative Committee, and of course his professional career as a property surveyor was going from strength to strength. Unfortunately for us, when we moved from Sutherland House, where Mr. Leung's office was, he found it, and as the calls on his time increased, he found that he didn't have time to partake of the unique fellowship that we have here at the FCC, and he resigned from the club. That's why we're so especially delighted to welcome him back today to talk to us about how he plans to deliver some of his manifesto promises, which, these are my interests, included providing more affordable housing, tackling pollution, delivering universal suffrage for the next election. I think he will also talk to us about the importance of Hong Kong's relations with China today. Other issues, of course, have dominated the news about the chief executive, and we're looking forward to hearing his thoughts about how he's coping with them. We will hopefully have some time for questions at the end, which is why I'm speaking very quickly and reminding you to turn all your phones to silent mode so that we can give our full attention to Mr. Leung. Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Douglas. Members of the FCC board, FCC members, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much for this opportunity to join you today. Some people have told me that when I get up to speak, I can seem rather serious, and that maybe I should tell a joke to break the ice. I like a good joke as much as the next man, and know that jokes are part and parcel of the bar-side banter in this great club. I'm not that good at telling jokes, so I won't tempt fate and depart from our usual practice. So sorry, no jokes today, really for everyone, but perhaps down at the bar one day. Some others have remarked that I am a hard man to read, that people don't really understand what makes me tick or where I'm coming from. If that's true, then that is something I do need to talk about. I think it's important to understand not just what I stand for, but also why I stand for it. One thing I want to say at the outset is that I strongly believe in the importance of free speech and a free and open media in Hong Kong. These are core values of Hong Kong and a competitive advantage. I pledge to uphold these core values along with others so important to Hong Kong people, such as human rights, liberty, the rule of law, democracy, equality, and justice. We are fortunate to have such a vibrant media scene in Hong Kong, not just because it keeps people informed and engaged about the many issues that are important to us, but it also keeps us connected to the mainland and the rest of the world. We are also fortunate to have such a concentration of international media organizations that play the role of reporter, interpreter, and commentator of events here and throughout the region. We welcome your presence and hope that you will continue to see Hong Kong as a vital element in your global news operation. We see your presence also as a vital element of Hong Kong's advantages as the Chief Information Officer and Chief Knowledge Officer for those interested in China. From financial services to real estate or social development, Hong Kong is the place to come to for information, knowledge, and networks. Believe it or not, I have been an avid newspaper reader since the age of 3. Of course, I couldn't actually understand everything I read in those days, but when my dad finished work, he would come home, pop me on his knees, and read the columns from the Gongxiang Daily, one of the 3 largest Chinese newspapers in those days, with me character by character. So that was my first encounter with newspapers in Hong Kong. And that must have left a deep impression on me, because when I did learn to read, I couldn't wait to pick up a newspaper to get all the latest stories about events unfolding here in China and abroad. And that would include many of the military conflicts in the country and in the region. I think this early habit of reading the papers was one of the reasons why I became deeply interested in what happens in Hong Kong. It gave me a good start in understanding the way in which Hong Kong works, the challenges we face as a community, and the way in which we may be able to address important issues such as poverty alleviation, care for the elderly, and housing. Newspapers left a slightly different but no less important impression on me when I was a student in Bristol in the UK from 1974 to 1977. 3 nights a week to make ends meet, I worked in a local Chinese takeaway, selling fish and chips and chop suey. Wrapping up a steaming serve of cotton chips, or sometimes place and chips, in an old copy of the Times or the Daily Mail really made me understand the meaning of the adage, today's news is tomorrow's fish and chip wrapper. For people like myself in public life, and for people like you who write about those in public life, there is a good life lesson in that old saying. Working in the fish and chip shop, you see that most people clearly uninterested in wrapping, only what's inside. So I hope I'll be able to peel back some of the wrapping that people associate with a serious CY, so people can understand more about what's inside and what makes me tick. As Douglas mentioned, I used to be a member of this fine club. I joined not long after I returned home from my studies in the UK, actually back in the late 1970s. In those days, it was in Sutherland House, which was demolished to make way for the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, which was demolished to make way for another incarnation. That in itself tells you something about Hong Kong. It is a city that is always changing and always trying to make the best use of land. My impression then, and it hasn't changed, was that the FCC was full of very interesting people, including a number of war correspondents covering Indochina in those days. And I use that term in the most endearing way. There were, of course, journalists, foreign correspondents, local reporters, photographers, as well as lawyers, PR professionals, and an assortment of business people, academics, civil servants, and a good smattering of old China hands. It's great for our city that the FCC has called Hong Kong home for more than 60 years, 30 of which have been here in these grand old premises in Icehouse Street. But it's also interesting to note that the club started off in Chongqing back in 1943, at that time the provisional capital of China and the base of various Allied operations during World War II. The club had homes in Nanjing and Shanghai before relocating to Hong Kong in 1949. So, the FCC and its members have always had a close link to and interest in China, its political, social, economic, and military development. Hong Kong has been an integral part of the China Watcher story. For many years, we served as the eyes and ears of the world for the China story and the most convenient and reliable observation platform. Some people think that with a more open and engaged China, that our role, Hong Kong's role, in this regard has diminished. I do not agree. I believe that our role is more important today than it ever has been, both in terms of enhancing global understanding about our country and its development, but also in helping our country to understand more about the world and its ways. The headline title of today's lunch, Hong Kong, the next 5 years. Well, 5 months into my term, I would like to narrow the focus down to the relationship between the mainland and the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region over the next 5 years. The management of this relationship, both by the central authorities and here in Hong Kong is as important as ever. At the risk of stating the obvious, it is without doubt our most important bilateral relationship, and one we must treat with the utmost respect. As Chief Executive, it is my primary responsibility to safeguard the interests of Hong Kong and of the Hong Kong people in our relationship with the mainland. For example, our measures to help ensure that the supply of residential properties is adequate for the Hong Kong people, our plans to curtail the number of mainland mothers giving birth in Hong Kong hospitals, our clampdown on parallel traders. Our approach and actions have shown that when there is shortage, Hong Kong people come first. Thus, one of my major tasks as Chief Executive is to foster a much deeper understanding in Hong Kong of what this relationship means to the mainland and what it means for Hong Kong. This is central to the success of one country, two systems, a subject which has been in the news lately for various reasons. The central authorities, including the new leadership, understand our value proposition as explained and protected in the Basic Law. They, together with local government leaders on the mainland, have high expectations of Hong Kong to contribute to the fullest extent possible to the ongoing process of opening up and reform in the mainland. If we can do that, we stand benefit enormously, and so can other parts of the country. This does not mean surrendering our autonomy. It means making the most of a high degree of autonomy as defined in the Basic Law. This is a great opportunity for Hong Kong. Our role, for example, in the Pan-Pearl River Delta grouping, what we call the 9+2, meaning the 8 provinces on both sides of the Pearl River, plus the Guangxi Autonomous Region, plus Macau SAR, and then Hong Kong, is a case in point. Just last week, I attended the annual Pan-PRD meeting with leaders of these provinces, the Autonomous Region, and the Macau SAR, and this was held in Hainan. I can tell you that our neighboring provinces and Autonomous Region hold us in high regard. There is much goodwill towards Hong Kong and what we have to offer. In my meetings, bilateral and multilateral, in Hainan, I stressed Hong Kong's highly international outlook and positioning in terms of finance, legal services, accounting, trade, logistics, shipping, aviation, and so on. In terms of the high number of international chambers of commerce, consulates, and international organizations based here, and that obviously include the high number of international media organizations based here. No other province or city in our country can play the role that we do, or draw on the breadth of experience that we have in dealing with the rest of the world. And that's a unique attribute of Hong Kong, and therefore our unique strength and advantage in the country. This is another example of Hong Kong's advantages as the Chief Knowledge Officer and the Chief Information Officer, and in particular what we can do to facilitate the mainland's global efforts. Here in Hong Kong, you'll find, for example, law firms from different countries practicing their national laws. If a mainland company is thinking of investing in, say, Italy, then they can come to Hong Kong and talk to Italian lawyers, the Italian consular trade officers, and the many chambers of commerce to find out more about the business and investment environment in Italy, without having to fly across the continent. It's much more convenient for mainland companies to do all the groundwork here in Hong Kong with our multicultural and multilingual environment. The 12th five-year plan takes us up to 2015. By that time, we expect trade in goods and services between Hong Kong and the mainland to be fully or very close to fully liberalized. The challenge that we face, the challenge for all Hong Kong to ponder, is not whether we should ask for a seat at the table of the 13th five-year plan to be crafted by the new leadership that will come in one form or another. The challenge is whether we can deliver what is being asked of us now and what is expected of us in the future as part of the nation, the family, and its polity. So over the next 5 years, my team and I will continue to work hard to deepen our relationship with the mainland across many sectors. I cannot think of one area of my work as Chief Executive of Hong Kong government that doesn't have this element in it. And this element is the relationship between Hong Kong and the mainland, or Hong Kong and the central authorities. And this includes not just trade, finance, and logistics, but also in the areas of regulation, legal development, and exchanges across many sectors, including arts and culture, creative industries, education, sports, and also at the government-to-government or G2G level. These are some of the key issues in the interface between the two systems within the same country, which make up the principle of one country, two systems. In all these areas, the country has been strongly supportive of expanding access for Hong Kong's goods and services, and of course expanding our role as the premier international renminbi clearinghouse and services center. They have been helping us with our external diplomacy on many fronts as well. But there's still a huge amount of work that we need to do to explain what we bring to the table for the country as a whole and for the promises that make up the country, and that is our internal diplomacy. 4 years ago, in his farewell speech in this very venue, the former British Consul General Stephen Bradley spoke about the need for Hong Kong to improve its diplomacy, but specifically our relations with the rest of the continent, in his words, that is China. He quoted in his speech a term which I had coined, namely 内交 in Chinese, or internal diplomacy, as opposed to 外交 or external relations. 内交 as in 外交 or internal diplomacy as in external relations has political and economic contents. On the economic front, there is a huge reward for fully unlocking our potential and access to the mainland market through PAN-PRD and CEPA. And there is another similarity between our internal diplomacy with the mainland and foreign relations between countries. In his book, Experiences of China, Sir Percy Craddock, an outstanding diplomat and a former British ambassador to China, described as Craddock's first law of diplomacy, that it is not the other side that you worry about, but your own. In 内交, one often worries about the Hong Kong side, and not so much the mainland or the central government side. Better communications with the people of Hong Kong will be the key to articulate our position in 内交, in the interface between the two systems within the one country. But we have to tell the people better stories about the mainland. Hong Kong has for many years been the largest single source of external investment in the mainland. As such, our investors and entrepreneurs have already contributed tens of billions of dollars to help upgrade cityscapes and service levels across the country. This, however, is not widely known or appreciated on the mainland. Hong Kong has also proved to be a fertile picking ground for global best practice and experience for the mainland in its reform program launched in the 1970s. This is not widely known or appreciated on the mainland either. From the first private land sales in Shanghai and Shenzhen in 1988 and 1989, to urban development, law drafting, and the training of mainland Chinese civil servants, to cite just a few examples, Hong Kong has been and remains a constant source of ideas, positive experience, and information to the mainland. This process still has a long way to go, and that means we still have much more room to contribute. We need to do more in our 内交 with the mainland, in complete compliance with the one country, two systems principles and the basic law. My team and I will work extra hard through words and deeds to address local issues as they arise, and to explain in more detail here in Hong Kong and in the mainland, and also abroad what we offer as a special administrative region of China, and as the most free, open, and international city in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a hectic first 5 months for me and my team. In just over a month, I will deliver my first policy address. It will touch on some of the matters I have just mentioned, and also some of the other important issues that Hong Kong people are concerned about: housing, poverty alleviation, job creation, the environment, economic development, and so on. Whether it is domestic, 内交, or foreign relations issues, effective communications with the Hong Kong and international communities will be a key component of our efforts. And the key partners in our communications will be the mass media. Ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you for your assistance and your partnership in this regard in anticipation. Now, I will be more than happy to take questions and comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. And I will look around the floor, and when I recognize someone, could they please identify themselves before their question? And I think I saw first the gentleman here at the front. Is anyone with a microphone for him?
Chief Executive, my name's Steve Vines. I know that you're obviously the third Chief Executive of Hong Kong. The first Chief Executive had to resign prematurely. The second Chief Executive, I think it's fair to say, lost an enormous amount of public support during his time in office and was plagued by scandals towards the end of his period of office. I'm just wondering whether you've learnt some lessons from what happened to the first two Chief Executives, or indeed whether Mr. Tung or Mr. Zhang gave you some advice on those matters.
Both Mr. Tung and Mr. Zhang are good friends, and they were chief executives when I was in their successive governments, convener of the Executive Council. I learned a lot from them then, and I'll continue to learn a lot from them going on in the future. We have regular meetings. I did not expect the chief executive position in the Hong Kong SAR government under the one country, two systems environment to be an easy ride. And I said this in Chinese as part of my election manifesto in Putonghua, 迎难而上, in Cantonese, 迎难而上, meaning we have to take the challenges in our strides. We have, for example, pretty deep-seated housing problems, poverty issues, issues relating or stemming from an aging, sooner than we think, an aged society. Environmental issues are challenging too. But I'm pleased to say that in my short experience in government in the last 5 months, the team and I work as a great team. We cover each other, and we sort out, we align our priorities into a common priority. I might just cite one example, which I think is important in a moment. And we have a great civil service. Provided you explain the goal clearly and explain to the civil service why you have set that goal, they go away, and before you realize, they come back with the results. and the implementation is even greater. On the question of priorities, let me just say this, and I hope that the Hong Kong community could feel the results before long. There are 6 government departments whose work concern the planning, the creation and the development of land. And this is essential to the provision of housing units, more housing units. Planning department, housing department, buildings department, transport department, environment department, and the lands department. And they answer to 2 bureaus, Transport and Housing and Development, which in turn answer to the Financial Secretary and the Chief Secretary. And as you could imagine, they all have their own work and their tasks. And not surprisingly, slightly different priorities. Within the first 3 months of the term of new government, we managed to align the different priorities into a common priority. It's a common government priority, a common Hong Kong priority. And we are seeing more units being pre-sold. We are seeing new plans being made. So I'm enjoying the work. It's hard work, a lot of pressure, a lot of challenges, but I find the work rewarding and most of the times enjoyable.
Chief Executive, thanks for joining us today. I'm Tara Joseph with Reuters. Property is not probably a word that you'd love to hear about these days, but I wanted to ask you about property prices in Hong Kong, which are obviously a key issue for the public. Despite government measures, we're seeing retail prices in Hong Kong top Manhattan, car park spaces going for as much as $3 million. What do you think can be done and done soon to help alleviate the pain that a lot of people in Hong Kong are feeling around this?
We have made some hard choices to manage the demand side when it comes to housing units. We do draw a line between housing and non-housing properties when it comes to demand management measures. It was a bold decision, but it wasn't an easy decision. We decided to enhance our SSD, special stamp duty measures, and then we brought in a buyer's stamp duty, BSD, which is still a subject of widespread debate in Hong Kong, but we believe that is the right thing to do. Before we launched buyer's stamp duty, statistics show that about 20% of the units in new developments went to buyers who did not have a permanent Hong Kong residency status. So we decided to manage that side of the demand. But the ultimate solution must lie in creating more supply through the development industry to cover the private sector side, and also through bodies such as the Housing Authority and Housing Society on the public sector side. It isn't, as we all know, a short process, land conversion, building development, but we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel because, as I said, we have reviewed our priorities amongst the various government departments, but it will take time for the first blocks or units to come out of the pipeline.
I think I saw the gentleman over there earlier. If you pass the microphone, take your lead first. Yeah. Are you passing the mic? Okay, so.
Thank you. Mr. Chief Executive, Kim Wing Liu from SCMP Chinese, South China Morning Post upcoming Chinese language website. On Maykiao internal diplomacy, what do you consider as the biggest obstacle in terms of convincing the people of Hong Kong the importance of this aspect of your work? Thank you.
As I said in my speech, I think communication is the key. Hong Kong government need to communicate more with the people of Hong Kong to, for example, explain and underline the promulgations in the basic law, provisions in the basic law that cover our political structure, our methods of election, Article 23, and the origin of these various articles in the basic law, and for the people in Hong Kong to generally understand the importance of maintaining our general relationship with the rest of the country, including the central authorities, in accordance with the basic law. As I said, it's a matter of communication. Where we have done well in communication, we have much smoother 内交 with the mainland.
I'm Bodine England. I write for the Guardian newspaper and I write history books about Hong Kong. I'm here.
Sorry.
Partly relating to the first question, you're now in a position of great importance for Hong Kong and you follow two previous chief executives, neither of whom allowed for any record of their time in office to be kept. And in fact, when Donald Tsang left office, more than a linear kilometre of paper was just tossed out of government. So there were no records. So that even now we can't really check exactly what Donald did about this or that. And the reason for that, as I know you know, is that we don't have an archives law in Hong Kong. And of course, alongside everything else that's extremely important about housing and poverty and the environment, can we hope, out of your policy address, that there might be a move on actually securing the history of this very special place?
It is a fact that we don't have archive law in Hong Kong, but it doesn't mean that Hong Kong government can throw official records out of the window just like that. We do have regulations and provisions about how we keep our records. I've heard certain parts of our community asking for archive law in Hong Kong. It's something that I'm prepared to look into, but I have to disappoint you. It's not something that any new chief executive could deliver in his first policy address 6 months into his first term.
It's your legacy.
Thank you.
We've got time for a couple more questions, so I'm going to try. I'm going to take someone from this side of the room. I haven't taken the gentleman in the back there. While we're passing the microphone to him, I think I saw Jit here inside.
Chief Executive Jitendra Joshi with AFP. Thank you for joining us. You mentioned as one of the priorities that you would cover in your policy address would be the environment. What can you flesh out anything from that? I know you're still obviously working on the speech and the policy ideas, but in terms of the environment, clean air, redevelopment, these are some of the most pressing issues for Hong Kong. So just to take air, for example, following yesterday's interesting conference that was held here, what can you share with us on that front?
I place a great deal of emphasis on the quality of Hong Kong's environment. And I've been active before I joined government, participating in issues such as climate change, air quality, and so on. I was a patron of the Climate Change Business Forum, and we had a conference in this very venue not very long ago. The priority over the next 5 years is air quality. Of course, there are other environmental issues, but the key will be air quality. And the focus of our work will be on roadside air quality. So within the next 12 months, you'll probably see government initiatives in terms of dealing with commercial vehicles, which form the main source of air pollution on roadside. Obviously, there are other issues or measures as well. Air pollution as a result of power generation, air pollution as a result of marine traffic. But air pollution is a key area of our work within the Environment Bureau.
Matthew Flynn. I'm an economist and work in strategy area, particularly in the maritime sector. My question relates to, so for example, in 5 years from now, what is Hong Kong actually going to look like? So for example, I have an interest in waterfront redevelopment. So my sense is that it's going to take something in terms of interdepartmental coordination and probably new conversations in terms of stakeholder engagement with the community to move things ahead. But more broadly, I'm more kind of curious that if I'm a man on the street or man on the tram, what is Hong Kong going to really look like in 5 years from now that's demonstrably improved and inspiring? So what can you promise as to what Hong Kong is going to look like a little bit different 5 years from now? Thank you.
5 years is not a very long time in terms of, not even in Hong Kong, in terms of changing the landscape or waterscape. But I was in the office just this morning talking to my colleagues about what we might do for Hong Kong going forward, next 20, 30 years. Hong Kong needs to sit down, particularly now that we don't have a big black line that's drawn across the horizon that said 1997. We don't have that kind of inhibition. We must sit down, look at a map of Hong Kong, and that would include the water body around Hong Kong, and ask ourselves, in 30 years' time, when our children have their own children who are teenagers, what would the shoreline, for example, of Hong Kong look like? Let me give you some more details. We know the population growth rate of Hong Kong. We know the household growth rate of Hong Kong, but that's just one aspect of future needs and demand. If you look at the size distribution of Hong Kong's housing stock, and that's public and private together, median size is about 40-something square meters. So let's be generous, 450 square feet. Roughly, we have 2 million units in housing stock. 1 million, roughly, is smaller than 450 square feet. If we cannot, within the space of the next 2 or 3 decades, generally increase space standards in Hong Kong, the best and the brightest of the next generation will leave us. We would have lost our competitiveness in attracting and retaining overseas talents. We would also have lost our competitiveness in retaining our own local talents. There's something that we need to address. We need to have adequate land supply, not just to meet new demand as a result of household formation and population growth, but also to give people more elbow room in their living space, also in their workspace. Terry asked about high costs of renting retail and business space and other business space. But it's not just the high costs. You walk around in Hong Kong, you see how cramped business space and the work environment are. So it's something that we need to address long term. Every time I sit down with the young people in Hong Kong, speaking to university students, for example, I say this: please, instead of asking questions, tell me what you think Hong Kong should look like 30 years from now. We have housing shortage. We have shortage of old people's homes. We have shortage of student hostels. Our streets are crowded. Our business space cramped. All these are because of shortage of land. But it isn't as if that we have run out of land totally in Hong Kong. Only about 20-something% of our land area has been developed. So we do have land that we could plan into or plan for development purposes. We had a couple of public debates in the last 2 or 3 months, which were very useful. I think Hong Kong people have finally come to terms with the fact that when it comes to land use planning, to make way for more housing land, for example, we have to make choices. 9 times out of 10, we have to make hard choices. We have to make hard choices between, for example, keeping certain parts of our countryside and using the land for housing purposes, or using land in Kai-Tak as sports stadia versus using them for housing purposes. And I think people are now, politically speaking, they have now matured to realize they'll have to make these hard choices. So, back to my view about the next 20, 30 years, we should sit down as a community, ask ourselves what Hong Kong should look like in 20, 30 years, and then together we have to make hard choices instead of government making a proposal to do something about a bit of our harbour or a bit about our countryside. Then you have individual objections to the proposition. I think we have a long way to go, but if we could make that first step in that right direction, I think our engineers and our professionals in Hong Kong will deliver.
Mr. Leung, I think we're running out of time, but I wonder, we're all enjoying this. I wonder whether you'd indulge us with 2 more questions? Okay, my apologies to everyone who's got their hands up, but there have been a couple of people who've been poking their hands almost in my face, it feels, for a few minutes, and I've seen them already. So first, I think Philip Bowering at the back.
Chief Philip Bowering. Chief Executive, you talked a lot about relations with the mainland and domestic issues in Hong Kong. Hong Kong's biggest business partner is the rest of the world. I'm just wondering whether you could say something about whether you are concerned about the relations between China and Hong Kong's immediate neighbors, who are also part of this East Asian trade linkage in which Hong Kong has always played such an important part, and the deterioration of relations between China and Japan, Philippines, Vietnam, and possibly Malaysia as well, can have serious impact on Hong Kong, and whether you are going to be having any talks with the central government about how to alleviate any problems which may arise for Hong Kong from these difficulties. And a slightly related topic is, does the Hong Kong government have a position, or is it developing a position on how Hong Kong may be affected by the US proposed Trans-Pacific Partnership?
The mainland is one of our single most important business and economic partners. That's not to say we should diminish the importance of economic and trade relations with other countries. I personally place a great deal of emphasis on that. I've been in constant touch with foreign consulate generals in Hong Kong in this regard, and also the many foreign chambers of commerce. As I said in my speech, one of the great strengths that Hong Kong has, that our brother provinces and cities on the mainland do not have, is our links to foreign countries. We're working hard on ASEAN +1+1 with some progress. It's a difficult subject, and that underlines the importance that we place on our economic relations with Southeast Asian countries. We try to keep, generally speaking, politics and business apart as a special and administrative region with a good degree of success. There are, as you mentioned, you mentioned Japan, recent disputes over the islands have set us back in terms of tourism both ways. But by and large, I think the changing relations between China and other countries have not affected us seriously. And that would apply to your last question about the Trans-Pacific relations.
Okay, I did actually see 4 of my colleagues here on the head table who indicated, and then to be entirely fair, it was Anna who I saw first. So Anna.
Okay, Chief Executive Anna Healy-Fenton, you talk glowingly about your team. Do we take that to mean that you feel very well served by them, or would you be planning some changes?
I don't have any change in mind at all. Both myself, the government, and by extension the community have been served very well by the team members. We use the word team generally in government to mean the politically appointed officials, the cabinet team, as it were. I've been very well served by them, so no change planned and no change needed.
Mr. Leung, there's obviously a lot of interest. Would you take one more question from the floor? Just the final one.
You're a very good negotiator. I'll take that. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I think that gentleman has had his hand up for a long time.
Thank you. Dean Napolitano with the Wall Street Journal. You mentioned the right of abode as one of the issues facing Hong Kong and China. Have you found a way to resolve the question of right of abode for babies born to mainland mothers? Are there administrative solutions that can resolve the issue? Or will you need to seek an interpretation of the law from the NPC's Standing Committee?
There are two sets of solutions. The first being administrative. A couple of years ago, when I first raised this prospect of using administrative measures to stem the flow of mainland pregnant ladies coming to Hong Kong hospitals, there were a lot of cynical views as to how we could do it. And I took the view that if we could, and we did, effectively stop, for example, guns from coming over the border from Shenzhen, we could stop pregnant ladies from coming over. A few weeks after I was elected, I declared that the quota for private hospitals admitting mainland pregnant ladies would be zero, instead of 30,000, 40,000 a year. And with the cooperation of hospitals, and I do thank them for cooperating, that worked. And the number of illegal mainland pregnant ladies coming Hong Kong or coming to Hong Kong in an illegal way, crossing the border, has dwindled to a few a week. So that's worked. But the ultimate solution lies in the second set, and this is a legal solution. Interpretation of the basic law is one route. It's provided for in the basic law, but we try not to use that route if we could use other legal means to put a final stop and produce a final solution that would be much better. But generally speaking, I think the concern posed by mainland pregnant ladies giving birth to babies in Hong Kong has more or less been addressed, but we will tidy up the legal ends of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you all please join me in thanking the Chief Executive for coming here, sharing his time and his thoughts with us, and welcoming him back at any time he likes for an off-the-record chat or an on-the-record one. Thanks very much again.